All right, welcome everybody to the third session of the GM support group. We are down a Rob today, but in the future we will be expanding our pool of panelists to a few more of the GMs that we know and love from our community. But for today we are going to be dealing with just the three of us, Fizzer, Walker, and myself. And we have a pretty good show for you today, I think. First segment, we're going to be talking about dealing with character deaths in our Beyond, or Behind the Screen, excuse me. In our second segment, a little bit lighter topic, we will be talking about inspiration and ways that we combat writer's block. And in our third segment, we will be doing the interactive, at least with these two, although you can play along at home, the interactive monster identification challenge. That one's going to be a lot of fun. I spent some time yesterday before D&D getting that prepared. So without further ado, if you guys have your dice ready, let's go ahead and roll to see who's going to talk about character deaths first.
Hey.
On brand.
19.
You got 19, you said? Alright, Fizzer.
I got a 9.
Well, that beats me. I got a big old 2.
Perfect.
Definitely fits. So,
Steven,
Walker...
are your dice weighted?
No, they're not.
Feels like a very common
I'm going to be changing dice for the next segments. I got into my dice chest and grabbed out a couple more that we'll be playing around with in the next segments. But Walker, if you don't mind taking it away for character deaths, you came pretty close last night, so maybe you can talk about it with fresh eyes.
I mean, it's one of the most important things I think in any kind of role-playing game where you're playing through the life of your character. To make it have meaning, there has to be a meaning behind death. Because, I mean, without meaning to death, you're playing a game where there are no stakes. You have a rotating door where characters go in one end and they can come out and then back in and out and back in. There's less to explore with the character motivations in that respect, I think. For me, I always make my characters have, at least the last couple, have some tie to death and have a healthy respect for it, because it helps them, helps them have their actions have meaning. So, like with, I believe, 2 and almost 3 of the last characters I've played now, they have come very close or have sacrificed themselves for the better of the group, because the way they looked at it was the death of one is better than the death of many, and they're willing to give that sacrifice due to their morals and their character, and that is how they look at the situation. So, without having a meaning behind death, you don't come to that kind of decision. There's no concept of sacrifice. There's no concept of giving it all for yourself, for a purpose, or for someone else. And in a game where you're having these mighty heroes doing these epic tales and epic adventures, if you don't have that, it feels like something's missing. So I always place a high importance behind death and make it more permanent than some systems would normally do.
Mm-hmm.
I know for both your and Rob games, and you'll see in my game that I'm starting today, death is death. And coming back from it is a very difficult thing to do, if nigh impossible, depending on what level your party is. So, with that, it really drives the decisions of the characters, and I think it makes them more creative with how they approach problems, where they're not just throwing themselves in the face of it or doing terrible murder hobo things and trying to get away with it, because they're no longer just in it and have a disconnect between themselves and the characters. It places them more in the situation and has more stakes behind everything they do.
Right.
And that's kind of the way that I look at it. Is it's very important. You can't have really D&D without death.
I hard agree with that. But I think I want to push back a bit on the idea that you need death in order to make sacrifice meaningful.
Okay.
Because there could be a lot of other types of role-playing sacrifice that don't involve death or damage.
That's true. That is true.
I'm talking about this one particular aspect of it, where if someone was to sacrifice themselves, that is, if there's no meaning behind death, they won't be driven to do that kind of thing. I'm not saying that's the only way that sacrifice exists. I'm saying that in sacrificing yourself for an ideal or for someone else, if death doesn't have any kind of meaning, people just kind of throw themselves into it, and it doesn't impact the story.
It becomes a bit more of a meat grinder than an actual
Yeah.
like
Very true.
dramatic experience.
I think I have a
I
good
can understand
story to interject, if I may speak out of turn, specifically with your character, Walker, that you played in my campaign, your first character. You guys were dungeon crawling and encountered a group of Kazme, and more came around, and you guys were not quick enough in getting out of there, choosing to flee. And the killing blow came towards your party's cleric, who was not your character, and you messaged me asking if you could dive in front of the blow, and it would have killed you as well. And that's the sort of thing that in that situation it's useful, A, to have a player who's interested in that sort of storytelling, but B, to have had some conversations with your game master, your dungeon master, beforehand as to what the game is like, as to how death might be handled. Because we'd had that conversation at the start of my campaign, was that death is a real thing. There are ways to beat it, but it happens. So knowing that going in is a useful thing as well. But yeah, that sacrifice changed a lot in my campaign. Rob's character went down a whole different road. He took multi-class and Blood Hunter as a tribute to your character's memory. We even had another character become a part Warlock in her memory, and that was the entire campaign would have been different if it hadn't been a sacrifice, if it had just been a death.
Right. And part of that was also to get our cleric to start being a cleric and have healing spells prepared. But that
True
was
enough.
Yeah.
All right.
D&D clerics are their own beast. In my experiences with death in campaigns, assuming that I can jump in now that I have a
Absolutely.
I have, I think, only ever lost 3 characters, and I've been running since 2014. The first one that I lost was kind of my own fault for just thinking that the rules were all that mattered in running a game. So I had a player who created a character, really loved the character, but played them very, very dumb. And some of the choices they made set them up to be in a situation where, at least if you went rules as written, they were not going to make it out. But this is not run in D&D, this is run in Cypher System, which explicitly tells you that the rules are there as a framework, and you should talk things out with your players.
Mm.
And I didn't do that, and that actually caused kind of a problem at the table when that player's character died. It was an amazing and kind of dramatic death, but it wasn't what the player wanted, nor did the player really expect it could happen. So that was just a mismatch that led to it not being interesting or dramatic or fun for people at the table. But from that, as you're supposed to as the dungeon master, and the next time things came around, I was faced with somebody who had been playing a character who was getting tired of playing that character, and saw an avenue for which that character could sacrifice their life by plugging their cyborg body into a ship's computer and letting the ship computer use them as extra processing power.
Mm.
And it burnt out that character. But it was very dramatic, and it was impactful because it introduced a new character afterwards that tied into that previous arc. So the player still got to play out more of that idea, but they also got to feel some of that sacrifice. And then the last time it really happened was the end of a season of a West Marches game that I ran, where a character, a player character, attacked a kind of like a end of season boss monster fight, that another another player character had managed to graft, or I suppose you could say possess, the boss monster with another boss. Um, I had them set up as two different experiences that I was hoping they would experience in two separate sessions at the very least, but it was a season finale. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
So they wound up fighting two bosses grafted into one, and he sacrificed himself by stabbing this gigantic, nearly kaiju level size monster in the brain and riding it down into the ground where it crushed him.
Huh.
That's good. Yeah.
All the other times I've experienced things that were close to death, it's been more about, okay, I want this to have a weight to it, but I don't want to stop your character's story here.
Right.
So, characters have experienced like they've had an eye gouged out, or they've lost a hand, or they've become cursed for some reason, or they're captured. Like, just because you drop all the way down doesn't necessarily mean you need to stop breathing. Maybe it just means you're in a very critical condition, and the people that capture you can do a lot of terrible things to you.
Right.
It's still negative because having death turn into a positive is, as a rule, not great. It's a rule you can break, but
very true.
Exceptions to rules should be exceptions, not rules themselves.
Right, and that kind of goes with it. Doesn't always have to be death outright, but the threat of death and danger is important.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
just
in most
day-to-day,
games, at least.
Yeah. We were just talking about a minute ago before we started the stream, the weather systems behind Icewind Dale, so the module that I'm about to start running. You can freeze to death. You can be hit with blizzards, avalanches, be trapped, and all of those sorts of things. And it's a real threat that traveling now becomes this difficult thing that you have to prepare for and you have to be very aware of. And if the threat of death wasn't there, it would be, yeah, it can happen, but I don't really care.
Right.
I think that's an important point, because like you can generalize that into the question of how does death fit into the gameplay loop of a tabletop role-playing game. Is it death is the end for your character? Is it death is an interruption? Is it death is a change in state of play?
Right.
Or like in the case of Icewind Dale, you are avoiding death in another way. You're avoiding death in terms of mastery of survival mechanics, not just mastery of combat mechanics. And that's kind of the feel I get from D&D.
Right.
The system mastery you build is part of that gameplay loop of how you engage with threats.
And it drives
Whereas if you go with like the Star Wars RPG from Fantasy Flight Games, like there's an explicit statement in that game of talk with your players beforehand to determine whether or not they are okay with their characters dying. The Star Wars game that I'm playing in, none of us die unless we give consent to the GM. That does not mean our plans will work, though. We've had a lot of terrible, terrible outcomes where we did not plan things correctly. But it's a narrative system, and it's not a simulation system. It's focused on the drama of rising and falling action rather than rising and falling heroes.
Okay.
All right, well, I guess I'll go last, and as I've talked a little bit, I'll be fairly brief. I agree with everything you guys have said, which is why the one thing that I really would add is once you've had your conversation with your players as to the status of death in your games, it's useful, and D&D sort of has some elements of this to begin with, to bring in some element of player agency when death does occur. So when you have a cleric, this is easy to do. You have Revivify, you have Raise Dead, you have other spells like this. But one thing that I've done in my game is I've taken sort of the same or similar basis to my resurrection rituals that Matt Mercer has in Critical Role. Although I think I've expanded it immensely, written out some pretty intense rules that make it a little bit harder to bring someone back, and it scales more. So we've had a couple deaths in my last campaign. Most of them were able to be brought back. But every time you're brought back, it should get harder and harder. Otherwise, the consequences aren't there. And having player agency involved, you have your players able to bring something to the ritual. And if they do really, really well, that might make it from an almost impossible scenario of bringing someone back to something that's actually pretty feasible. So that's really the only other thing that I like to bring to my table is that extra bit of last minute. All right, they're dead, but is there something we can do about it?
No, I'm running a D&D game right now, and none of the players have died yet. None of the players have gotten actually to a level close to dying. But the theme of death runs through all of their characters. One of them is a necromancer. Another one is a death god zealot barbarian. It's you can't choose a character that does not have death as a component of their existence in the world. And the world that I've constructed around them for them to explore, the more I think about it, doesn't work with resurrection magic.
Really?
Now, they don't have a cleric, so resurrection magic isn't a problem yet, and they're also only barely level 4. But
Sure.
I'm thinking that the next time I run a game for them, I bring up the fact that there's this dearth of that type of magic in this world that may be remedied by some of the things that the necromancer is researching, or some things that the death god zealot barbarian might be able to unlock by actually pursuing that connection more. But I kind of like the drama of there isn't a way around that. So
Right.
assassinations of like major political figures actually carry a lot of weight.
Right.
Right.
Right. Similar in that effect. Otherwise, if you didn't have something in place, assassinations would never work because you'd always just be able to bring someone back. I tend to have my assassins in my games wielding, especially the higher level ones who might be attacking political figures. They tend to wield blades or poisons that do something to the soul, either trapping it in the weapon itself or immediately sending it beyond the divine gates that separate the material plane from Easgard or the Nine Hells or wherever the soul is bound. Because once the soul is out of that
if you
place,
wanted to damage the soul, wouldn't you just use a spiked boot?
I mean,
Ouch.
yes. But what was it? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In high fantasy, it's hard to have the same kind of story that you would in a medieval setting because a lot of the intrigue aspects of it are centered around assassination,
Right,
poisonings,
right.
that sort of thing, and suddenly you have magical people that can just stop all of that.
Yeah.
So when you have something that actually works and your players are understanding that with all of the things that people know how to do, there was no way to stop that thing, all of the sudden it becomes the people that we're fighting or the people that did that are extremely powerful.
Absolutely.
And it becomes like, if they can do that to one of the most powerful people in the world, what could they do to everybody else?
Yeah.
So it definitely establishes a stronger power gradient in the world.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And the other thing to think about is just in general, if you plan to have death as something that can happen in your world, think about how might you get around that problem of assassinations before you get started. At least have something in mind so that when your players eventually ask, wait a minute, if I try and assassinate the enemy leader, why isn't someone just going to bring them back? Definitely something to think about ahead of time.
You can have cool NPCs with that too, like a death guard for an emperor who their entire job is to bring them back from death should it happen, and they're just kind of following them around or something like that.
I think it might have been Dale Kingsmill who planted this idea in my brain, because I've watched a lot of her videos and they blur together a little bit after a while. But the other concept of when a cleric brings someone back from the dead with resurrection, they need to spend some of their own soul to bring them up, and that's exemplified in like one of their eyes turns to look at as the other person, the person that they raised, and it's like the eye is the window to the soul. Yeah, this is definitely Bill Kingsman because that's something she said. Like the eye is the window to the soul, so they exchange an eye. So you've got this kind of forced magical heterochromia as a marker of I am not 100% myself because I've been brought back from nothing.
That's an interesting idea, maybe bringing in some sort of soul connection between two characters, the resurrector and the resurrectee. There could be some really interesting things to play with in there for sure.
With that too, having to give them some of your own soul could stem from when you come back, you are not quite your whole self. You've lost something along the way, lost a part of your soul, and for them to successfully bring you back, they need to fill it. And that could also be in Resurrection, where if they're not filling it, you come back not quite yourself. You're still the same character with a lot of the same goals and motivations, but perhaps
also
maybe there's a piece missing.
Die and stop existing, and then start existing again without that changing you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
so what does that do to them? What did they see? How long were they dead?
Yeah, I always think of the beginning of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Dr. McCoy is asking Spock, what was it like to be dead? And he says, I can't discuss it without a proper frame of reference. Dr. McCoy replies, you mean I have to die to discuss your concepts on death? It's a very sort of interesting idea that the person who comes back is definitely not the same person. They might be missing a piece, or a whole bunch of things could happen in that sort of transition. And definitely a lot of things that could be added to a game for sure. However, I think that's enough of the depressing concept of death for now.
Well, I see we got some people in chat.
Yes, we do.
Do we want to ask if they have any questions about how we handle death?
Sure. I think, well, Phantom Ninja we know, at least Walker and I do. I don't think his character ever died in my game, but anyways, if you are in chat and you are interested in asking us questions as to how we handle certain things, feel free to send up a message, and if we see it, we will do our best to answer it. And we do have a little bit of something to talk about as far as questions are concerned, but we'll get to that towards the end of today's session, as it's something we'll be starting in future sessions as well. For now, until we see a particular question in the chat, we're going to go ahead and jump into Away from the Table. And of course, we can keep talking as the title slide goes on. Today's Away from the Table, we are going to be discussing inspiration. When does it strike? How does it strike? How do you encourage it to strike? So, let's go ahead and roll initiative. I'm going to be rolling my frosty blue dice in honor of Icewind Dale starting today.
Elf.
4.
You got a 4 as well? Oh, you got a 6. Well, it looks like we know who's going first.
All right. Okay. So, matters of inspiration are incredibly important to me as a GM, because if I don't have a picture in my head, I cannot picture or follow any action of what's happening or at the table. So, I'm a visual guy. I like art. Music has some place for me at the table, but if I want to really run a session I believe in, I need to have something in my head that I can dissect, pull apart, and just scatter in front of the players for them to play with. And one of the best places I've found to do that is imaginary landscapes. It's a subreddit where people just they'll post art that they've made or they've found with links to the artists. So if you like a particular art style, you can go and find more. And sometimes it's fantastic science fiction worlds. Sometimes it's a very quiet valley. The breadth of content you'll find on there is excellent fodder for an imaginative mind.
Okay. So you like adding a story to a place or a thing that you've seen, and that's a good way to do it for you.
It's also part of like how Numenera trained me to be a game master, because Numenera is set up as, hey, you're going out into a world that is very alien, and you're going to explore it. So if I have alien locations in mind for you to explore, then that's all I really need to run.
Right.
For characters, character art is kind of everywhere. There are other subreddits that link off of imaginary landscapes, like imaginary wastelands, imaginary. There was imaginary deities for a time. If you wanted to do like a, a hyper mythological campaign, there's just so many different inspirational images you can pick up, and then in some cases I'll push them to my players, or in other cases like if I show this to the player, they're going to know too quickly where I got this from or what it will do. So I'm going to describe parts of it, and the process of discovery is smeared out a little bit longer.
Right, like you're talking about piecing it out so they see little bits here and there to assemble the picture themselves. And I think that's a really important part about it, is making them an active person or an active element of the storytelling. And doing it that way much more pulls them into whatever it is that you're trying to create.
I kind of like to have this is what I do with my NPCs, actually. I like to have a fuzzy idea of who they are, because I leave them in this quantum zone of, okay, this is an NPC that has like this set of information and this vague temperament, but until I actually interact with the players, I don't really know the rest of who they are. And my players have taken to this and called it chestering, because that's the name of the first NPC I did this with. Because I knew there was a character in a junkyard, and when they were wandering around, they thought, man, wouldn't it be awesome if like this junkyard we're wandering around in had a junkyard owner with a dog? And I was like, sure. And then they met Chester and his little dog Daisy. And it took him a while to come around to the fact that me not having anything fully written ahead of time wasn't cheating.
Right. And they don't always have to know the amount or the ratio of prepared to just kind of pulled out on the fly. Yeah, this exists.
Yeah, well, so I'm a very open guy. When I'm GMing, it kind of turns into, okay, how much do I want to tell them that I pulled like everything out of the back of my head? None of this was written down. I actually I developed a tick where I will like, okay, say, hold on a second, let me look something up, and I'll just like go to a random page in OneNote and think, what the hell am I gonna say?
Yeah, I've noticed you do that. In fact, I've done that myself many times.
Sometimes you just need a moment to go, okay.
Yep.
There's this. They know all of this right now. They're here. I need someone to push them in this direction.
And it is always a great excuse. It's always a great excuse to say, let me look that up real quick. They're going to believe you most of the time that you're going to look something up.
This is going further on the tangent, but several of my players actually made it a goal, like a little like mini sub objective, to get me to just like stop and stare into the middle distance once the session.
We did that to Rob last night, pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
They took a picture of me with like holding my hat over my face, just thinking what's going on, and they shared that amongst themselves for a while. It was funny.
Yeah,
that's pretty great.
All right, Walker, I think it is your turn to talk about how you beat writer's block, how you fill pieces of your world, what inspires you.
So my approach to inspiration and writing for most of the campaigns and really everything I do is I go with the approach that we are who we are based on the influences that we've consumed up to that point. Be it music, be it art, be it literature, anything. So whenever I get to a point where I've written as much as I can, but I can't quite think of something, I think, okay, I know all that I know. I'm going to go look at something brand new. Something brand new that I have never seen before, never heard before. Maybe it's a new book. Maybe I go to the art museum that has a new exhibit local or right nearby. Maybe I walk around in the community and go find a place I've never been before. And I really think about how how can I make what I'm trying to create better based on this sense of exploration? Because that's what
Mm.
I think in my core that D&D is a really big proponent of is exploration of the world, delving into the unknown, trying to make something of yourself, make the world a better place, perhaps make the world a worse place, depending on the party. But going out and exploring is a big part of it, and I liked doing set pieces where you find something that's otherworldly or fantastic, and it gets to the point where I want to have that sense of wonder and exploration of finding something new that you haven't found before. Because just like you as a DM are a combination of everything you've consumed to that point, they as players are the same way. So they know what they know, and if you can show them something brand new and get that moment of, oh, this is really cool, I love that.
Yeah.
Like one of the books that I bought was Fantastic Locations. It was a Kickstarter a while back, and in my last campaign that y'all were playing in that underground crystal city that I had that had fallen out of the sky in
Mm-hmm.
this massive cavern, I was trying to set that up as you wandered through some sewers, there's a crack in the wall, you wandered in this cave, and there's just this massive city that no one knew about. It was there from hundreds of thousands of years ago, and as soon as you did something in it, it got transported to another dimension with you in it. And that thing that you found, I hope, gave that sense of what the fuck is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely did that, as well as now we're in the abyss. What are we gonna do?
Exactly. And that
Yeah.
was the next step of this is all brand new to you.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I know. I know nothing about this. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like getting them to that point where maybe they have some understanding of what's going on. Maybe it's entirely new to them and they get to figure out a brand new way to interact with this thing,
Mm.
whatever it may be. I like seeing those interactions. I love when players really get into their character and start looking at, okay, this is what I believe, this is what they believe. In this kind of scenario or situation faced with this kind of thing, how would they react?
Right.
So getting those unique encounters drives them to react in unique ways. So, yeah.
Well, that's good advice. Get stuck, wander.
Yeah,
That's good advice.
absolutely.
Nice, and that's a pithy comment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my style is perhaps a combination. I also seek out new things, but it tends to be uh, content from typically the past. I am an old fashioned person at heart. So when I get stuck and I'm trying to figure out story beats or I'm trying to figure out what's going on in this part of the world, I go back to classic movies. I go back to TV shows from all the eras of television. I go to old video games that I haven't played in 10 years. I go to books that I haven't read in 10 years. And I read, and eventually I'll find something that says, well, that's interesting. They handle it like this, but what if I handle it like that? And eventually, as that new idea is kind of fermenting in my mind, I take it and I run with it, and it ends up very different than the original media, but it's something new and something wholly its own, so to speak. And sometimes it doesn't work so well. Sometimes I end up with something pretty close to the original. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially because most of the stuff I consume is old. Most of my players don't get it. So it tends to work out pretty well. Other times, I choose a source of media that everyone has seen, and they're like, you stole it from that. And that would be often the case. But that tends to be where I go for my inspiration. And I have a prop for today. I like props. This game is amazing. I bought it a couple months ago when I got back from grad school. It's called Call to Adventure, and it is a board game, but it's mostly about finding your character through play. And this is something I really wish I'd had Fizzer while we were in the same city.
Yeah.
Because it's a sort of game that you would like, and it's a sort of game that I would like to play with you. Walker, you'd enjoy it as well, I'm sure. But it's all about finding your hero or perhaps villain through 3 stages of their life. And when I've gotten stuck on, okay, I need to have a wizard character, what am I going to do? I have gone to this deck or this board game and pulled out the character cards and flipped over a random card and said, oh, well, this character was apparently a part of a caravan that went south. South as in turned bad. And then eventually, kind of an important distinction, and eventually, turn over the next card, they apparently fought a pirate king. Cool. And that's been useful, and it's not what the board game was intended for, but I have found it's...
We're game masters.
Right.
We clutch.
We pull things from everywhere we can. There's a new Kickstarter that I just saw. I don't remember the name of it. Now I gotta look it up, otherwise I'm gonna feel really bad. It just came out a couple days ago, and I think it's Story Decks or something like that. I'll pull up the link to it, but basically it has inspiration, it has story beats, it has all of these little things that can help you find a thing to get past your writer's block. And it's mostly focused towards D&D or fantasy RPGs. I'm sure it can be used for Pathfinder without any trouble. And similarly, if it can be worked in fantasy, not terribly hard to convert it to science fiction. But that is one of the things I've recently found, and I'm almost there. It's called The Deck of Stories and NPC Cards. You can look that up on Kickstarter. Just backed it. I think it's going to be pretty good. Still got 26 days on the campaign, so by the time this goes up on YouTube, it will have 19 days left. This should go on YouTube on the 11th of October. Today is the 4th, if that is useful. But that looks like something that'll be really useful. It looks like it has sort of similar elements to Call to Adventure, but definitely more focused on the roleplay aspect than a board game itself.
Okay. What is it? That brings up a really important point too. Is as GMs or consumers of media and of stories, and we like repurposing them, finding inspiration in them. Most important things that I think that we as consumers must kind of pay into is supporting those that create. That Kickstarter, things like that, things where you can directly support the people making these wonderful things. If we don't do it and we don't make it a point to do it, they go away, and all of the inspiration that we pull to make these wonderful things goes away with it. So it's always been very important to me for wherever I go to consume media to contribute to who made it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's almost our duty to do that.
Absolutely. All right.
Stephen, you mentioned about taking things from like older TV shows and putting them in your game reminded me of it's a straight quote from Matt Colville, but take the stuff you like and put it in your game.
Yeah,
is such an excellent watch phrase when I'm like preparing for stuff, because it doesn't need to be. I think the context for when he said that was he took the plot almost directly out of an old Star Trek.
Yep,
like
it was Where No Man Has Gone Before.
Where No Man Has Gone Before, and put that into his game and actually planned it out with one of his players.
Yeah.
But it can't go exactly the same way because you don't have the entire cast for that show.
Correct.
You are not, in a writer's room writing out dialogue for people to do. So no matter what you take, you don't need to be worried about, is this going to be too close to the source material? The act of taking it to the table is transformative in itself.
Right, our players are not, at least for the most part, we might have one co-conspirator, something I've considered doing in the past and will do in the future. Our players are not going to be wholly aware of the plot, and they're not going to stick to it, because where would be the fun in that? And every move that they make is going to change things, and eventually, where we end up is going to be pretty far adjacent from where we started, or where we intended to end up. And that actually brings us to a question from Space Turtle 37 in chat. Space Turtle 37 asked, I'm going to take a wild guess here and assume you guys watch other people play D&D or talk about their experiences. How do you draw inspiration without just emulating others? Or do you abstain from D&D content to avoid that from happening? Additional addendum, is there copyright within the realm of D&D? Good question. First, let's address the addendum. The addendum, there is copyrights. However, a lot of things, especially it is very complicated.
Yes.
The rules of D&D, I believe, are, for the most part, especially the stuff in the player's handbook, are under an open license, for the most part. You can read the license and make sure you understand what's going on. But the Forgotten Realms, for the most part, is also under a semi-open license. There are things that you can use and things that you can't use, and it gets complicated. But when you are playing just with your friends, you don't have to worry about it. You're not selling anything. You're not making any money off of anything. It's free and open for you to use, and that is their point. As to... Let's go to the first question. How do we, if we watch D&D shows, which I think all of us have at some point or another watched some D&D shows.
That is true.
Yeah. I particularly enjoy Critical Role and the Chain of Acheron, and have stolen from both of them on more than one occasion. I had a Furbolg magic shop owner named Farkin who talked with a southern accent, and that's where the comparison stops. But the point is, you don't have to draw, or you don't have to go far away from the point of inspiration. You can use the direct thing, and to those who understand it, it's a nice little Easter egg. To those who don't, it's probably a cool thing because you thought it was cool enough to put in your game.
Right, and that kind of goes back to emulation, or imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Right.
You're using this thing, like he was saying, because you like it so much you wanted to put it in your game.
Absolutely.
And that's an important thing, that you have fun with your own game as well. And should you find something you like, there's nothing to say that you can't use it, as long as you're not violating any copyrights and making money from it.
Exactly.
Which, in the most cases, you're not doing when you're playing with your friends. Anyway.
It should be pretty obvious if you're going to make any money off of it and it's not your stuff, you're probably violating a copyright.
I'd say the only way you can really worry about only emulating the thing that you watch is if you're not consuming anything other than that piece of media for a long time, because then you're just copycatting somebody, and you don't have this is how inspiration works for me, and it's how my desire to create gets fueled.
Mm-hmm.
You take I heard this excellent song the other day. And you know what? The sun right now is coming through the window, and it looks really, really nice. That's really beautiful. And your brain is tremendously interconnected, and it takes all of these disparate experiences and filters them together. And your ability to think of something new is dependent on the breadth of things you've experienced before. So, in the case of watching people play D&D, if that's the only thing you're doing, I'd encourage branching out. But in terms of seeing how other people take those inspirations and mold them into something for D&D, that's a wonderful experience, because you get to see, oh wow, I didn't know that I could take something like that, and then just, I took an owlbear, but then I gave him a helmet, and I made him super intelligent, and I played him like Doctor Who. Sorry.
That's really bad, but I like it.
No.
That was a joke I got myself after I said it. So that's the point.
Yeah. The point is anything that you try to emulate. Anything you try to emulate
teaches you how to use it a little bit better.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Well, that was a great question.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably time to get on to the third section of our game. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Walker, but we are 45 minutes into the show. I would like to make sure we don't go too far over an hour, just to keep this a little more palatable as far as consummation is concerned. But thanks for the questions. That was a really good one. Definitely got us thinking and talking. But we are now going to move on to the third and final section of today's show, Roll Initiative. So be prepared for the Monster Identification Challenge, and in this about 5-second break, grab a pen and a piece of paper if you want to play along.
Boy.
This is going to be fun. I am excited for this. We'll see how much my hour and a half of preparation did.
If you want to give me a buzzer in the future to stop me from talking so much.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm not afraid of interrupting people. At least not too much.
Yeah.
So, what I will want you guys to do, I don't really have a piece of paper, so I will use a sticky note to show what I am going to be doing. It's a shame to not be in my own office right now. I would like you guys to make 3 columns with 4 lines each. And you're going to want enough space to write down the name of a monster. Something that looks maybe a little bit like this. Enough space, of course, to write down a monster's name. But 3 columns for 3 different rounds, and 4 lines for 4 different attempts in each round. And the name of the game is Monster Identification. So today, I'm going to start with the first bit of the first round by reading resistances and immunities for a particular monster from the Monster Manual of 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So, Fizzer, I apologize. I know this is not your system of choice, but I think you're going to do just fine.
A note in advance, is it just the Monster Manual?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I'm not going to say I guarantee it.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. I think it is. They're pretty typical monsters. After we do the damages, the resistances, and immunities, we're going to jump to the monster type. So that might be aberrations, elementals, fae, fiend, undead, celestials, all the different types of D&D monsters. You probably won't need a full list. After that,
I might just make up a new monster as we go.
That's fine. That's fine. If you don't know anything, if you don't know the particular monster, it's fine to make it up. The third section, you will be read the names of the different actions, and then the last section, I'm going to share my screen and show the silhouette of the monster. And each round...
Who's that Pokemon thing?
Right,
Yep.
Right, sure. I don't know anything about Pokemon, but I know more about D&D monsters. So each round, you'll write down what monster you think it is. And if your guess doesn't change between rounds, that's fine. But if it does, that's also fine. If you happen to guess it in a particular round, you'll get points. Even if you guess it in the first round, but not the fourth for some reason, you'll still get points, just not for the round you missed. So every round that you get it right, you get points. And then we'll go to the next round. Hopefully, this doesn't take too long, because I've got 3 rounds planned. But we should be fine. And hopefully it won't take this much time in the future when we do this segment again. Is everybody ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So, first off, damage resistances and damage immunities. This particular monster is resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks that are not adamantine. Damage immunities, poison. And I'll give you about 10 seconds to get your guess, just so we don't go over time. All right. Hopefully you've got your guess down. Better to guess. Not multiple choice, Space Turtle. That would be too easy. All right. Second line.
I wish Space Turtle.
Yes. Second line, the type of creature. This creature is elemental in nature.
Oh, that was... My first guess is very wrong.
I've heard this before. What is it?
All right. Make sure your guess is written down. Next, I'm going to just read off the bold text of the actions. And I guess I'll do abilities too, because some things are not technically actions, but they're useful for the monster. So this creature has false appearance, multi-attack, bite, and claws.
Oh, this sounds very...
I was really hoping this would get me farther. Oh boy.
The adamantine is ringing some bells, and so does the false appearance, but I can't quite remember what it was.
Write down your guess. And lastly, I'm going to have to share my screen here and get this all set up. Might take a bit of a second. Actually, which side do I want it on? We'll do that side. And I'll make it a little bit bigger and share my screen. The names are going to be off. Don't worry about it. All right, here. And back to full screen. The names are not terribly off, I don't think. Probably off. Yep, they're off. That's all right. This is your monster.
It's an elemental. Huh.
All right, you have 10 seconds.
I know what it is. That took way too long for me to get that. That's embarrassing.
And write down your final guess, and we'll do the reveal of the monster itself.
Ooh. I got an idea for a new monster.
Here is the monster. Come on. Here. Do I gotta scroll out? Probably.
Oh.
Come on. Oh. There is the monster. And for those of you at home, this is a gargoyle.
Yep.
Ta-da.
All right, so what I'll have you guys do is on the first line, the top line, write down, if you got gargoyle right in the first round, which I don't think anyone did, write down 7 points. On the second line down, write down 5 points if you got gargoyle, 3 points for the second to last line, and 1 point if you only got it on the silhouette.
Hey, Walker, are you and I tied?
I got 1 point there, bud.
1 point. All right. All right. It looks like we're going on to the second round.
My first guess was a Hydra.
Yeah, that's not an unreasonable guess.
What if you had a gargoyle Hydra?
You can definitely do a cross gargoyle with something else. That would be really interesting.
Right?
I was thinking something in dragon family, and then it got to be an elemental. I'm like, there's an elemental maybe, and then
so
I didn't
Space
know where to
Turtle.
go from there.
I believe the gargoyle is elemental in nature, as it sort of takes the form of rock. I presume that's what's elemental about it. That one was kind of a bit of a trick. It might have tripped you up a bit. Let's go on to the second round, so move on to column 2. And I'll read off the... Well, that's not useful. In this case, I'm going to be reading... This one does not have any resistances or immunities, but that is in itself a clue. So I will read, in that case, languages that it might know. Why not?
Boy.
First time doing this, I didn't expect that. I didn't read through this monster very well, apparently. So, resistances and immunities for this creature? None. Languages known? Giant. You have 10 seconds.
Obviously a gnome.
I've had gnome NPCs that have spoken giant. Funny thing,
they just use like a very large bullhorn to like match it.
Indeed. Yeah. I like to think, or actually, funny thing, Walker, your nameplate is currently on the gargoyle.
I know, I see that.
just a little humor. This also isn't going to be particularly helpful. So this creature is a giant of the giant type, and I'll give you its alignment as well, just for an extra bit of hint. It is chaotic evil. I'll pick better monsters next time. That's on me.
Yeah.
Having to work for those 5 points, though.
It's probably a giant.
Some kind of giant, yeah. That's
it's in the
what I'm
giant
thinking as
family.
well.
It's in the giant family.
There are a lot of them, though.
This is true. This is true. All right. So the next thing, as far as this creature's bold text, it has keen smell, regeneration, multi-attack, bite, and claw. Keen smell, regeneration, multi-attack, bite, and claw.
Giants?
Lean in a little bit away from that now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Write down your guess if you have not already. All right. Last challenge. Let's go ahead and flick over. Come on. You know you want to. All right, let me... Just a second here. Some bugs to work out, obviously. Close out of that.
That's all right.
Open this up. Hello, computer. Alright, and let me... Wow, my computer is really struggling today. It's old. Share screen.
You're also streaming, yeah.
I am also streaming. That is a very good point. Alright, and back to full screen. This is your monster. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Hello, computer.
that's what that is.
You know what? Okay, you know how I said, like, I can count the number of monsters I've run out of the monster manual on one hand?
Mm-hmm.
That's the pointer finger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I actually thought about that when when this one came up. It's like, huh, Fizzer's gonna get this one. All right, so let's go ahead and do the reveal. Please work this time, computer.
Let's see what I am this time.
Are you gonna do it? It's thinking. Well, this is a... I'll just tell you guys. This is a troll.
Yeah!
Because
I
apparently
got that one.
my computer
I can
is
hear
having a heart
Professor
attack.
Quirrell screaming that.
Troll!
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so go ahead and add up your
Troll in
points.
the dungeon!
Add up your points, and we'll see where you guys are after... How many points did you get in round 2? Same thing, 7, 5, 3, 1.
I got 4 that time.
Nice.
Ew.
I thought it was a
All right, so
fire
you guys are
giant
tied
before
at 5.
Generation.
The Fire Giant was a good guess.
I thought Etten.
Etten is also a good guess. All right,
Most
this
of the
one
giants
is going to be interesting.
boy.
So, reading immunities and resistances, for this particular creature in the 3rd round, this thing is resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks, and it is immune to psychic damage.
Oh crap,
Yeah.
it's a professor.
Could be.
Ah, boy.
Glad you're having fun. I'll try and pronounce your username, Falir. Hopefully I said that right. Glad you're having fun. No shame in 0 points. I don't know how well I'd be doing. We may have to have someone else be the hosts sometime.
I got you next time you want to do
All
this.
right,
I got
all
some
right.
good ones.
Yeah, we'll probably do
We
this
can
when we
rotate
have
the hosts.
when we have 3
that'd be
people.
fun.
When we have 3 people, we'll probably do
Ooh.
this sort of challenge.
I've got an idea for a sci-fi version of this.
All right,
boy.
that'd be good too. This creature is a monstrosity. Not to hurt its feelings, but it's a monstrosity. That got you thinking, didn't it?
Oh boy, that's a stab in the dark, but I'll take it.
All right. Walker, you got 5 seconds.
I'm thinking.
Like half of the stuff I make is monstrosities.
It's very
Write down your
general.
answer if you
Yeah,
haven't already.
I got you.
All right, so this thing has a lot, so be prepared.
Oh, boy.
As far as this thing's bold text, it has inscrutable, magic weapons, spellcasting, multi-attack, claw attack, and teleport. And that last is under the legendary actions section.
Ooh.
So I'll read that again. Inscrutable, magic weapons, spellcasting, multi-attack, claw. Legendary actions are claw attack and teleport. This is a tough one. We may have to change some of the point values for the next time we do this.
I'm coming up with some crazy ideas, but none of them are going to be right.
You
Yeah,
never know.
same.
You never know. And I will say there's a potential to get partial credits on some of the things for this one. Let my my teacher side show up a little bit.
Ah.
All right. with that, we're going to jump to the silhouette. And
oh boy.
I went to the correct screen this time. Excellent. And let me share my screen. There's got to be a better way to do this. I'll figure it out for next time.
You could hold up a hand-drawn portrait.
I could print it out. This is the creature of choice.
Oh.
That was a guess! What?
All right, 5 seconds to write down your guess. Okay, so let's go ahead and reveal that this is, of course, a Gynosphinx.
If I just said Sphinx,
you're going to get partial credit. You're going to get partial credit. Don't worry.
Didn't say, okay, we get partial.
Because there's an Androsphinx and a Gynosphinx, and there is a distinction between them. The Gynosphinx is the more difficult of the two. Hold on. Let me pull up a picture of the Gynosphinx so I can show it, because Windows is dying on my computer. Images. Let's see here. Here. Come on. This. Can we see that? Rotate that way. That is a Gynosphinx.
Yep.
All right. So, how many points did you guys get? 7, 5, 3, 1 in round 3.
So for half credit, how does this
half
work?
credit, right. So what we'll do is, as this is based off of D&D, I guess, we're going to do half rounded down.
Okay,
so if you wrote Sphinx or Androsphinx, actually if you wrote Androsphinx, you'd get half rounded up. If you wrote Sphinx, you'd get half rounded down. So if you wrote Androsphinx for the top line, which would be a phenomenal guess, you would get
no, I said
4
gibbering
points.
mouther to start off with.
That's a good guess. That's a good guess.
I was stuck on mind flayers there.
Yeah, understandable for you. All right, so go ahead and tally up your total here, and we will see what you guys got, and we'll see who today's victor is.
Let's see. I got 7 total for all 3 rounds.
7 total. All right.
I ended up guessing
I got
Sphinx.
6.
Ah.
7
wait,
versus 6.
Hold on. Did I do my math wrong? I did Sphinx for the last 2.
You
I did
Sphinx for the last 2.
The second one and the last one.
So he should beat you by a point because you guys were tied going into this round.
Yeah, because when he said mental resistance, I was thinking through if it's not a mind flare and a monstrosity, probably a Sphinx, maybe.
Well, that was good. All right, so Walker.
And then you said it could teleport, so I went to Displacer Beast for some reason. Then
yeah. Hey, good job, Echo. That 5 points. Space Turtle 0 is not a bad result. This was a hard game, especially if you haven't played too much before.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, good work, guys. 7 and 6 points is great. That's absolutely great.
Yeah,
I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. That was one that I thought up. I'm a big fan of the old 70s game shows, so I was trying to figure out a way to do like the match game or something like that, but we need a whole lot more people to do that. However, we do have a brief announcement here. Starting next session of this, so in 2 weeks, we are going to be having a question and answer segment. And it's a little more formalized than what we did today, where we had questions able to be asked throughout the process here. And of course, if you are watching this on YouTube after the fact, the best way to get in on this, at least the live question and answer, is to watch us stream live on Twitch, which is at 1 p.m. Pacific time every other Sunday. It should be the week after you're watching this, the day it comes out. So our next live airing will be on October 18th. Yes, October 18th, and then the next one after that would be November 1st, and if there's going to be any issues with schedules or anything like that, we'll let you guys know, hopefully with enough time to spare. But if you are not able to watch live and you still want to get a question answered, we have an email account. You can email us with your questions at gamemastersanonymous@gmail.com. And the best subject line to use is Q&A, October 18 or Oct 18 2020. That is on your screen now. It will also be in the link or in the description in the YouTube video. If you don't use that cue or that subject line,
What were
that's
you back
fine. It's just easier for me to organize things, especially as we hopefully get more viewers for the future. So if you can, email us at Game Masters Anonymous with that particular subject line down there. That would be awesome.
Yes.
And we will do our best to answer your question and hopefully give you a little bit of help in this Game Master support group, which is for everybody. It's not just for the three of us, it's for all of you as well. And I think that is about all the time we have for today. We only went over by 5 minutes, which is awesome.
Better.
Yeah. I mean, our first session was pretty much spot on. Second session, we went over by 20 minutes, but that's all right. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today. It looks like you did. I think we're going to try and do a few more heavily interactive things like that game show in the future. And make sure to give us a follow on Twitch to get notifications when we go live. And subscribe on YouTube in case you happen to miss a notification. The video quality should be better on YouTube just because it's being directly recorded to my computer, and any streaming issues that my poor, struggling 6.5-year-old desktop has won't be present there. So if you missed anything and want to check up on it later, YouTube in a week from today will be your best bet. In the meantime, keep rolling your dice, everybody, and have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.